So, this presentation is targeted at anyone who wants to learn how to play Monopoly or have an understanding of what makes it an interesting game. You might have heard that there are people who play this at a high level, and you might think that it's a game of luck and chance and that nothing matters. And you're about 25% correct. But there are ways to actually be good at Monopoly, and a lot of that has to do with understanding the value of the different aspects of the game. So this presentation is going to basically break down the game at a high level and give you the tools to understand what you're doing in the moment. So there's a couple of universal principles that are going to be repeated throughout this presentation, or they're going to inform why certain things are important. So these universal principles, first of all, upward mobility is the most important factor in determining who's going to win. Upward mobility is your ability to get income on the board. Everybody has go income from passing go, but your properties on the board allow you to gain net worth and strip it away from enemies. You want to get good upward mobility as fast as possible, and ideally as many places as possible. This is to say that if you had, for example, let's say you had like 12 properties and they're just scattered around the board, but your opponent has 2 properties that are really built up. They have higher upward mobility. The base rent is pennies and basically does not matter. There's a bullet point here. The best set is the one that you can finish, and that is something that you can keep in mind. I'm going to, over the course of this presentation, say that certain sets, like green, for example, are terrible sets. They're not good. Avoid them, so on and so forth. If green is the set that you can finish, then green is the best set for you at the moment. Because a completed set that you can build on is what gives you upward mobility. There is no meaningful upward mobility in just owning a lot of properties. The other part of this upward mobility concept is the 3-house rule. Every single property in the game, when you go from having 2 houses on it to 3 houses on it, the amount of rent that is owed to you when a player lands on that space spikes. The non-set value to the full set value, which is twice the base rent, to the first house to the second house, is almost an unnoticeable increase in upward mobility. It doesn't really add that much to the rent, but once you get 3 houses, it just explodes. And from there, 4 houses and then 4 houses to a hotel. It's an increase, and it's usually more of an increase than 0 to 1 and 1 to 2 houses. But you really want to get 3 houses as fast as possible on something. Whatever set you can finish, if you can get to 3, that's what you should be focusing on as like phase 1 of your plan. The next part is the concept of a bootstrap versus a kill space. Part of upward mobility is there you can take small steps to increase your capital, your net worth, and slowly chip away at enemies. Those are called bootstrap spaces, because they allow you to build much more expensive things that function as kill spaces, or the spaces that when people land on them, they're designed to just remove that player from the game. The rent is designed to be so high that it exceeds their net worth, and you just get all their stuff. This is a widely misunderstood rule of the game, but if a player lands on a space and they can't pay the rent, and you knock them out and they go bankrupt because of you, you get all their stuff. So knocking a player out of the game as fast as possible is a almost surefire way to win. There are very few games where the person who knocks another player out first doesn't go on to win. Monopoly is extremely snowbally. This was actually by design. The game is it mechanically and just sort of overtly is actually a screed against capitalism, but capitalism works this way too. If you are obscenely rich or you have a lot of things, you get more wealth. That's just that's the nature of the game. Bootstrap spaces are not mutually exclusive with kill spaces. You can kill somebody on a bootstrap space. You can kill somebody on anything. It's just a matter of, did they land there when they didn't have any money? But the idea is that you build on a kill space with intent to remove somebody from the game, where bootstraps are there so you can build up to something else. It's a slow drip of money, as opposed to I will get whatever they have, but I'm not expecting to see everything that I invest in it. And I'll get more into the difference between a bootstrap and a kill space when we get to the individual spaces. And then the final universal concept is the idea of heuristics and sniping. I actually made individual slides for these, so I don't know what I was going through. But let's see if I missed anything. Okay, upward mobility. This is a very important concept. So high upward mobility is great because when people lose money to you in rent, your net value goes up, their net value goes down. You effectively, if you measure the game state in terms of who has the most like capital or who has the most net worth, whenever somebody lands on one of your spaces, that the difference between you is literally twice of whatever the transaction money is, because you're going up, they're going down. When somebody lands on like an income tax space, for example, and they just have to pay 200 to the board, that they're losing money, but you're not gaining money. So that's a bigger difference in upward mobility. Yes. The other thing is you want to build fast. You want to get upward mobility as fast as possible. All of the best players of this game will try to rush a set as soon as possible. If you're playing against somebody who, as soon as all three properties of a particular set are distributed in some way, shape, or form, and they're looking to make trades like really aggressively to get that set, you're probably dealing with somebody who knows what they're doing. The faster you remove somebody from the game, the less they can get their roots in and start earning money that you would then have to deplete. You can think of money as like a health bar in like a traditional game. And as people get rooted into the game, they have more properties, they have more available assets, their health bars become harder to take out. When you start the game, everyone begins with $1,500, and there's this initial phase where everyone's just buying properties. And during that phase, when we're just sort of going laps, picking up properties, seeing who gets what, the initial distribution phase, by the end of that, very few people will have anything built, but everybody's economy will be at its weakest state because they've invested the most money into actually getting the deeds, but they don't have the capital to build, or they don't have the capital or don't have the set to actually build on them. Any money that you spend on the board, such as building or even just getting the deed to a property, has a 50% loss on it. This is to say, if you were to buy a space on the board, it says it's 200. You buy that space, you lose $200, but you could mortgage that for half of its value of 100. So in theory, you've only lost $100 of net value by buying a $200 space. The same goes for building on a space. If you buy a house that costs 100, and you then have to go back and sell that space, you only get 50 back from it. So anytime you put money into the board, if you get into a pinch, you only get half of it back. So consider how you are investing money onto the board, and consider it lost. 3 houses, I already talked about this. Rent explodes once you hit 3 houses. Get to 3 houses as fast as possible. This also means that if you are in the state of the game where everyone's distributing properties, kind of sets aren't really complete, and you finally get your first complete set, mortgage everything if you have to, to build up on that one set. It is way more valuable to you to get about $400 some from mortgaging your miscellaneous sets to build up on one completed set to hit 3 houses than it is to get like, you know, $12 here, $24 there from people randomly landing on these incomplete sets. It will not pay for itself. Just mortgage them. And if you get the set later, feel free to unmortgage. You know, you basically, you only lose 10% on unmortgaging a mortgage, because you get half of the value of the property back when you get half of the value when you mortgage, and then you have to pay half plus 10% to unmortgage and then make the space usable again. And then, yeah, the best set is the one you can finish. Seriously, just finish the set and start building, because that's the only way to actually like win this game. People complain about how Monopoly like lasts forever. The game does not last forever if you're good at it. A room of people who are really bad at Monopoly can play Monopoly for literal days because they don't try to finish sets, or they're too afraid to make trades that will complete a set that will get the game going somewhere. And if you find yourself in a game with somebody who absolutely refuses to trade, and nothing's getting done, just forfeit the game. It's not worth it. The game sucks. The game is actually really fun when people play it correctly with intent to lose, which does involve some sort of risk. I already talked about bootstraps for skills. All right, heuristics and sniping. This is really important. You got to know how dice work. So an average die that's not weighted or cursed or anything has a 1 in 6 chance of landing on any of the given numbers. But the thing is, in Monopoly, you roll 2 dice. And that has a very interesting effect on the dice rolls that people get. Because math, a roll of 7 is the most common, because there are the most combinations of 2 dice rolls that add up to 7. And then from there, it sort of tapers off into a bell curve. Then 6 and 8 are about as equally common. 9 and 5 are about as equally common, but less common, and so on and so forth. This is to say that you should probably hold on to your money before building as long as you can until somebody's getting close to actually landing on your stuff. Let's say you finish building up you just got your light blue set finished, but all the players are on like magenta and orange. They're like on the west side of the board. Hold on to that money until somebody is starting to get to the south side of the board where they could actually possibly land on your stuff. And you'll know when they're getting close when they're within about 10 or so spaces. And especially wait to build if somebody is 7 spaces or so away from where you're going to go, because statistically speaking, they are most likely to then land on your property. A snipe is when you build on your turn, the turn right before somebody lands on your stuff. And snipes are super optimal because they allow you to hold on to capital. Remember when I said that putting it onto the board, you have a 50% loss? It basically, you avoid that loss as long as possible. And a really efficient snipe will allow you to distribute your investment very efficiently. So if somebody is, let's say, 7 spaces away from my magenta 2, when I'm building, I have to build evenly, but I can, like, let's say I have 2 houses and everything, I can put a 3rd house on magenta 2 if they're 7 spaces away from it. And that's a really efficient investment. I didn't have to put an extra house on everything. I just sort of focused my investment on, okay, I'm going to hit that 3rd house spike on the space that they are most likely to hit. If you can afford to build them all up, of course, do so. But distribute your investments in a way that is most likely to catch people as soon as possible. Because if you put money on the board and you don't see a return from it for a long time, that's just money that kind of just vanished. All right. So let's get into sort of the meat and potatoes of this lecture, which is just talking about the individual sets themselves. They're all good insofar as if you can complete them, they're good. And it's not necessarily all about landing ratios. You may have heard somewhere that like orange and red are the most landed on spaces. And I can get into why that is, but it doesn't mean that orange and red are better because people land on them more. The difference between like the most landed on space and the least landed on space is so minuscule and honestly imperceptible in most games that that land ratio as guiding your investments should be completely meaningless. What the land ratios do tell you, though, is why certain spaces are valuable. And we will get to why orange and red are the most landed on when we get to them. But for now, I'm just going to move on. When I'm explaining a space, I have a shorthand that is very useful. International versions of Monopoly have different names for different properties. You might have some special edition, like, I don't know, like a Pokemon Monopoly that names these spaces something different. And honestly, if you were to ask me what like this space is right here, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I don't know what they're called. I call these by their color and then the order in which they appear when going around the board. So for example, St. Charles Place right here, I call this Magenta 1, then Magenta 2, then Magenta 3. I will also refer to railroads in a similar fashion. This is Railroad 1, 2, 3, and 4. The utilities are the utilities. I will refer to them as Utility 1, Utility 2. And this basically just unifies your experience across all games of Monopoly that you might play. The Monopoly Junior or several other abridged versions of Monopoly have condensed sides where every set has 2, and then you only roll with 1 dice. I will not be talking about those versions of Monopoly because, quite frankly, they aren't good. Well, at least I don't find them as interesting. And then Chance and Community Chest, I will refer to them as Chance and Community Chest. The difference between them is Community Chest usually has income. Chance is kind of varied. Chance is also important because of warps, and I will get to warps when they become relevant. All right, that said, let's get to it. We're going to start with brown/purple. On older versions of the game, it is purple. On newer editions, it is brown. But it is the first set after go. This set is a bootstrap set, like dialed up to extreme. I would say that brown is actually one of the most underrated sets in the entire game. It's stupid efficient to build on. So each side of the board, if we actually go back a slide. So the way that build costs work is the south side of the board is 50 per house. Then you go west side, it's 100, 150, and then 200. Basically, each side of the board, building prices per house go up by 50. This starts multiplying out of control really quickly. But the reason that the south side is amazing, because at $50 a house, and with the brown set only having 2 properties in it, each layer of houses, which is to say put one house on each, or upgrade to a hotel on each, only costs $100. It costs you $120 just to get the properties, which is dirt cheap, because if you look at blue, if you go over to light blue, these are the light blue 3 already costs $120. So for the price of light blue 3, you already have access to both of these. Then you can build them up really quickly. It costs you only $620 to buy both of the properties and max them out to hotels. Once you have invested only $620, you have a 40 on brown 1 and a 73% return on brown 2. This is to say that when somebody lands on brown 2, they pay you with a hotel, it's $450. That is almost your entire investment back on one land. That is insane. As we go through these properties, you will start to see just how inefficient some of these can get. If even brown 1 has a 40% return for a single land, it's 250. These numbers are nutty. these are not the most landed on spaces according to, statistics or whatever, but screw statistics. You got 73% of your investment back on a single land. There is literally no space in the game that is that efficient. So basically, TLDR, brown, costs nothing. You get your investment back almost immediately, and you can build it up really quick. The one downside to brown is that it is very difficult to rush this set. Baltic, or brown 2, is 3 spaces off of go, so everyone starts on go. And remember when I talked about how the average roll is 7 and then like 6 to 8? So the average first roll is either going to be light blue's 1 or 2, or this chance space. It's very difficult to roll a 3 on your first turn. There's literally one combination of dice that will get you that. And you literally cannot roll a 1. So Mediterranean or brown 1 will never get claimed on the first pass around the board. Somebody has to make it all the way around before the spot can get claimed. So oftentimes it will go pretty late into the game before both of these properties are in somebody's hands, and you can concern yourself with trading for them. But if you can, and it happens early, you should see that as a massive opportunity. You could have gone around the board purchasing, a potpourri of spots. And if brown is completable, you can just dump $600 into it, and it's fully built, and you get amazing return on investment. For very similar reasons, light blue is also a very good bootstrap space. If I was evaluating brown versus light blue, I would say they're about even, but I would lean towards light blue. So the advantage of light blue is comparatively, remember how I said that brown's really hard to rush? Light blue is super easy to rush because between 2 to 4 players, and I recommend playing Monopoly with 4 players, these spots get scooped up real quickly, just off the back of the first couple of rolls. So it's not unusual for the first lap around the board for all the light blue spaces to already be in somebody's hands, and you can start trading for them. Similarly, they're really cheap. They're 100 each, which is still pretty darn cheap, especially compared to some of the later spots. It costs $320 to get the full set, and these have a 51 to 56% return. Go back 40 to 73, it's already plummeting, 51 to 56. For every set of 3, the third one is the one that has the high number, and the other 2 have the low number. So Vermont and Oriental, or light blue 1 and 2, have a 51% return, where light blue 3 has the 56. For all intents and purposes, any set with 3, 1 and 2 are identical in terms of rent and cost. This is a fun little Monopoly fact. It costs just over $1,000 to build all of these hotels, which is still really cheap. Like, again, we're going to get to the numbers later, but $1,000 is stupid cheap. And the other advantage to light blue over brown is that there's 3 of these spots where there's only 2 brown. So you have more places that people can land on, and it's pretty easy to acquire and pretty cheap to invest in. You can win a game off of just rushing light blue. It's actually one of my favorite strategies, my second only to rushing railroads, and we'll get to railroads later, but they work on a very similar principle, where the faster you can build something up, the faster you're getting income and draining it from other players, and consequently that game will end faster. If you can get somebody's money before they can invest it on the board, that's winning. This light blue set also absolutely blows Magenta out of the water, which we're going to get to now. Magenta. I don't like this set. I would say this is my second least favorite set on the board. And the reason I don't like Magenta is because light blue exists. So Magenta is where we start to get to the west side of the board. And as I said earlier, each time you cross a side of the board, the cost of building it up increases by 50. So where you could get 3 houses on light blue for $150, you have to pay twice that to get to buy 3 houses on magenta. And because it's the set that follows after light blue, the return on investment, or how much the rent is when somebody lands on this, isn't that much higher. Obviously, the rent is higher as you go around the board leading up to go, but like the increase between light blue and magenta is where it starts to sort of peter off. Like orange is obviously a little bit better than magenta, red's a little bit more than orange, and so on and so forth. But whenever you look at the west, north, and east sides of the board, I look at the 2 sets as the inefficient one and then the efficient one. So I can build on orange for 100 per house, and I can build on magenta for 100 per house. But orange has a higher yield, like the rents are higher. Why would I prefer magenta, which is more expensive? Or sorry, it's the same price but for less yield when I could get orange? Or the set before it, which is the efficient set on its side. For example, why would I get green, which is crazy expensive, when I could get yellow for less money per house and about the same return for rent? So magenta's kind of inefficient. There's a couple of saving graces to it, though. For one, very much like light blue, it gets scooped up pretty early. These spaces fall within a very good heuristic of spaces that people will roll within the first 2 turns of their game. These being 11, 13, and 14 between the first 2 rolls. So these will get scooped up pretty quickly. And they are still only 100 to build on, which compared to the north and east sides of the board are pretty cheap. But start looking at these return values here. So you get it's 2,000, just under 2,000 to max this out. It's literally twice as much. It costs twice as much to max out magenta as it does light blue, and you get a smaller return on it too. It's not looking so good. That said, it's only more expensive from here. So if you're on a budget, magenta can work and you can start to see value from it. We couldn't talk about the west side of the board without talking about jail. So we're going to take a break and talk about jail. You might have heard that orange is the most landed on set. Specifically, Tennessee Avenue is the most landed on space. And so you might think that it's the most valuable space. And it's kind of true. And the reason is because of jail. So in Monopoly, there are so many different ways to go to jail. You can go to jail as per the space. You could get a chance card that says go to jail. You could get a community chest that says go to jail. Or you could roll 3 doubles in a row, which doesn't happen that often, but will usually happen at least once per game. Point being, there's a lot of ways that people can end up on this space. They could also just land on this space. This is literally just one of the spaces on the board. People could just be visiting. And remember when I talked about the way that dice rolls work, where 7's kind of the average? 7 puts you at community chest. So set plus or minus 7 puts you on either Tennessee or St. James, or Orange 1 and Orange 2. That means that through the myriad of ways that people can end up in jail, the next space that they're going to get on out of jail is going to be orange. And for this reason, orange is a very valuable set, because it's a common place for people to go. But another reason that orange is very powerful is because of that efficient versus inefficient set that I talked about. This costs the same to build on as it does magenta, but a higher yield, and also people are likely to land on it. So, orange. These are great kill spaces because of their reliability of people landing them on out of jail. You can build these up, and this is where it starts to rent starts to get pretty expensive. I think on this space on Orange 3, the rent is, I think, 950. I want to say it's 950 when you have a hotel on it. And once you're starting to see transactions of over $1,000 because of rent, that's what I start calling like a really good kill space. These are going to remove players from the game, and you might not even see the full $1,000, but the amount of property swing and like resource swing that happens when you take somebody out of the game through bankruptcy, I would consider that worth more. So it kind of comes out in the wash. The set is 560 to complete, and it costs 2,000, just over 2,000 to max out. Again, compare that price. It's literally only 120 more dollars to max out this set, and that mostly just comes from the difference in the cost of the onboard price. Something to be aware of with the orange set is a lot of people are actually like really wise to the fact that this set is really important. So if it comes down to an auction, people are willing to pay a lot for these. When these sets are auctioned, I very often see people pay like 400 on the board for them. So be aware that if you get to really coveted spaces, the effective price on the board can increase if you don't get them naturally through just landing on them when they're unowned. The final thing to note about orange is that orange 3 is a back 3 land. What that means is there is a chance card that says go back 3 spaces. Every other chance go back 3 does something pretty harmless. Chance back 3 here sends you to income tax, so you lose 200, which sucks, but it's not a property land. Back 3 on this chance sends you to a community chest, so this one might as well just say draw a community chest instead of a chance card, which is whatever. But this back 3 sends you to orange 3, so I think I want to say there's 12 chance cards. I can't remember exactly how many chance cards and community chest cards there are, but one of them is back 3, and it can send you here. I don't know if I mentioned this, but Magenta 1 is also a chance warp, but it's a very specific chance warp. There's a chance card that specifically says go to Magenta 1. So there's literally 3 spaces on the board that have a 1 in however many chance cards there are chance of sending you straight to Magenta 1. So if you do get Magenta, you want to build up on Magenta 1 first, unless you see that card go pretty early. Like if somebody gets that card and then you have the Magenta site, you'd be like, maybe I'll hold off because it's probably going to be a while before that card is drawn again. All right, moving on to red. These are also very popular spaces to land on for the same reason that orange is popular. It's a common double roll out of jail. These are thoroughly kill spaces, but they're kind of inefficient. The set costs 3,000 to max out. You will not be... red is the set is... once you start getting to the north and east sides of the board, these are the sets that if you finish them early, you are not going to just be able to be like, okay, I dump all my resources into building these out. You literally cannot have enough money on hand to even get 3 houses without going around the board several times or having some other form of income. So starting in these sets, these are sort of going to be bootstrap spaces. So you're going to be getting these small amounts of income slowly over time, but then they can become kill spaces. So I would consider the north side of the board sort of this hybrid between bootstrap and kill, depending on how much money you have to invest in them. Red 3, Illinois, is a warp space through chance. Just like Magenta 1, there's a chance card that says go to red 3. So that's a good one to build up. Also because it's the expensive one of the 3, it just makes sense to focus on that one if you in a vacuum. 36 to 38% return when maxed out, and yeah, like I said, just under 33,000 to max out. I don't like red for very similar reasons that I don't like Magenta, but the difference is I feel like red can go somewhere. Like I can invest in red as a bootstrap space and then it can eventually become kill when I need it, where Magenta is almost exclusively locked into being a bootstrap space that is also inefficient and that doesn't really go anywhere. So given a choice between red and Magenta at both inefficient sets, I would pick red because it can go somewhere. And that brings us to yellow, which yellow, basically everything I said about red apply to yellow, except it's more efficient. The return is 36 to 38. It's 38 to 39. Very marginal increase. The difference is there's no chance warps that send you to yellow, and yellow is also dangerously close to the go to jail thing, which means that this is sort of like the last spot that it's kind of really worth investing in, honestly. But we'll get to dark blue in a little bit. I don't really have much else to say about yellow. It's decent. It's a good kill space if you get it built up, but it is kind of expensive to build. All right, let's get to green. For reasons that I've already covered, green sucks. This is redonkulously expensive. It's 4,000 to max out. You will not max out green. If you are even building on green, you probably have already won the game. These spaces are expensive. They're 300 each, 920 to get the whole set. And they're 200 per house to build on. Again, if we dial it back to the south side of the board, it costs the same amount to max out brown, 600, basically 600, as it costs you to get one layer of houses on green. And one layer of houses on these is, I think the rent is around like 90 or so. I think it's 100 or just shy of 100. So you're telling me that you're gonna spend $600 to get 100 back when you could spend the same amount of money to get 450 or 250 back? Yeah, that's a really hard sell for me. I've never seen somebody start with green and then use green to carry them to victory. Like, I've seen every other set be something that somebody like, okay, I invested in this and because of this set I won. I would never attribute a win to green other than if green was the space that they landed on that resulted in a knockout. Green is a place that you invest if you've eliminated every other player from the game and you've like absorbed all their wealth and you actually have the funds to build on this. Point is, green, these are for trading to chumps. If you were to, I'll buy them if I land on them because having properties to trade is good, but I would not value them in a trade. Yeah, they suck. But like I said before, the set that you can finish is the best available set, and if green is the only set you can finish, then you have to play with green. Compare this to dark blue. Dark blue is such a weird set. So there's two of them. So the only other two set is brown. And if you remember when I was talking about brown, how just because there's two spaces, it's super efficient. For the same reason, dark blue is actually really efficient despite having the same build costs per house as green. But because there's only two of them, the set is cheaper. It's only 750. It costs less than 3,000 to max out dark blue. Next closest set is orange. It's between orange and red. It's cheaper to max out dark blue than it is to build on red. Think about that for a moment. The most expensive set in the game. This is what makes the set good. Boardwalk is, of course, infamous for having a ridiculously expensive rent. And it is true, if you have both dark blue 1 and 2, and they land on 2, the set rent is 100, that's a pretty good return on investment. Most unbuilt properties have an awful return on investment. As I said earlier, if you're not planning on building something, you should probably mortgage it so you can spend that money on building something that can get you money. Dark Blue 2 is also a warp space. It's the most powerful warp space. There's a chance warp that says go to Boardwalk or Dark Blue 2, and that will end somebody. I consider Dark Blue a hybrid bootstrap kill space for the same reasons that I consider red to be in that same category, where you can build on it just a little bit and it's a decent bootstrap, but eventually it gets to the point where it'll kill. especially at the 3-house spike. I believe it hits 1,000 on 3 houses, which is kind of nutty. The thing with that though is you should be, if you own this set, you should be very cognizant, more so than any other set, of what the net worth of every other player is. So Dark Blue's rents start to get really high at the high end. I believe the hotel rent is $1,950. I think it's $1,950, so it's just under $2,000. Most players will not have $2,000 to their name. And for that reason, you should evaluate, like, okay, how much, if they were to sell everything that they had, plus their cash on hand, about how much money would they have? And you want to build, like, up to that. So there's very few game states where building more than 3 houses on Dark Blue is ever, like, even worth it, because you'll very quickly eclipse how much they could realistically even pay you if they did land on the space. And that's sort of the nature of kill spaces, but especially with these, with Dark Blue and Green, you really don't want to over-invest, because it's already so expensive to invest in these sets. And look at these returns, 55 to 73. Does that look familiar? Does that look familiar? Let's go back to Brown, 40 to 73. Look at that. Look at that. You will get your investment back on Dark Blue very quickly. And that is why you should covet these spaces. Not because it's the big bad boardwalk where I have to pay like $1,200 when I land on it. It's, these spaces are very efficient to build on for the power that you get on them. But there are only 2 of them. They are on the east side of the board, which means the players do have to overcome getting jailed. Like, they have to go to jail. And people who go to jail are going to be pretty far away from landing on these spaces. So I'd say they're risky, but the reward is generally worth it. Finally, let's get to railroads. I freaking love railroads. They are objectively a bootstrap strategy, but they're a really interesting one. So they cost 200 each, and the rent is 25, 50, 100, or 200, depending on how many railroads you have. The thing is, you can't build on railroads, so their rent is directly related to how many of them you own. The return on investment on owning all 4 railroads is 25% per railroad. That's really good return on investment for something you only had to pay a maximum of 800 for. And values can vary a little bit if you get these things through trades, which you often will. But if you can, I would take, let me play it this way. I would trade away a green property, a yellow property, or a red property that wasn't part of a set for a railroad any day of the week. Because you basically buy railroads once and you just sit on them and they just passively earn you income. Here's the thing. Here's a perspective. If you look at the board, there is literally no space on the board, no matter where you are, that you aren't within a roll of landing on a railroad. This is to say that there's 10 spaces between railroads. If you're on a railroad, you roll a 10, you're on the next railroad. No matter what space you're on, you could potentially roll onto a railroad. There's obviously certain spaces where that's less likely. If you're directly before a railroad, you'd either have to roll very low or very high. But in those situations, now there's 2 rolls that you could make that would put you on a railroad. These things will earn income, but the thing is, you have to have the set of them. Otherwise, you're getting about, you're getting a 1/8. Yeah, you're getting 1/8 the income per land, and that's kind of crappy. If I didn't have the set, I would just mortgage it for the money, but I'd hold on to the property, of course. Railroads have a different value per railroad. Railroad 1, in the Classic Edition is Reading Railroad, is the most valuable one by far. What makes Reading Railroad so valuable, you might be asking? All right. So, first of all, it's the most likely to be picked off of turn 1. Rolling a 5, not unheard of on turn 1. Secondly, there's a chance card that specifically says go to Railroad 1 or Reading Railroad. So, plus the 3 chance spaces where somebody could just go to Reading Railroad. Then there's also another chance card that says advance to the nearest railroad. This means that railroads 2 and 3 are potential targets for advancing from a chance card, but so is Railroad 1. So there are 2 chance cards that could possibly send you to Reading Railroad, in addition to just being at a decent spot on the board. Short line, or Railroad 4, cannot be advanced to via these chance cards. This one would advance you to Railroad 3. There's no chance cards between here. So there's no way to chance go to short line. So for that reason, I would value this one the least and this one the most. These two are about even. Both of them have a single chance warp that will send you, and they just have the passive value of being a railroad. Yeah, they're just really efficient, and I like them. I have won many games off of just railroads and brown and or light blue. Literally no kill set, just I got them very early, I focused them, and I was willing to overpay for them in trades, and I just sat back and watched as while everyone else was trying to build up stuff, I just was passively getting, 200 here, 100 there, 200 there, and I chipped people out of being able to even have any money to create anything that would threaten me. Again, build fast is super. The build fast principle explains why railroads are good. You don't have to build on them. You literally just have to own them. And they start getting you income comparable to like a South Side property. Compared to utilities, I don't like utilities. They're okay, but the thing with utilities is they're not going to win you the game. There's chance cards that say advance to the nearest utility, but otherwise they're kind of just 2 spaces on the board. If you do get one of these, the other one becomes a lot more valuable. So the way that these work is if somebody lands on them, you take their roll and you multiply it by 4, and that's the rent. So it's a maximum of 48 if they get a 12, which is literally one of the possible rolls. If you go back to the average roll of 7, that's literally a rent of $28. It's not worth it. Like, it's not worth 150 to get 28. If you have both of them, so the set costs 300, then the rent becomes 10 times what you rolled. So a maximum of 120, but an average of about 70. It's kind of chump change. I don't care about these. I'll pick them up. Like, always pick up a property if you can, because you can trade it to somebody who will take it or who does want it. But I can think of exactly one game I've ever played where one of the utilities was the reason that a player was eliminated from the game, and it was really just a matter of somebody could have sneezed on that player wrong and they would have been eliminated because they were basically bankrupted from something else. So it wasn't really the utility's fault. And they certainly don't really contribute a lot of income. But that said, you can also sometimes run into games where they actually do manage to pay for themselves, but I would consider those few and far between. So that's it. That's an overview of the different sets and what makes each set valuable. Again, I want to circle back to the initial principles, though. Always measure your value in terms of upward mobility. You want to get the ability to take money from other players as soon as possible, and you want to do it in meaningful chunks. This means get to 3 houses as fast as possible. Those are the ones that are going to, that's when the investment starts actually like paying for itself. The best set is always the one you can finish. A finished set is always better than a bunch of random cards that don't do anything for you. Understand the idea between a bootstrap and a kill space. bootstraps, you're going to you're going to chip out your opponents, and you're going to get income to build up on something else. Kill spaces, be careful of over investing in them, because the idea of a kill space is to be enough money to bankrupt a player, and you don't want to do, you want to do as little overkill as possible. Kill spaces tend to be very pricey to build up on, so you don't want to overinvest on them, because again, that's just money dumped into the game. And be cognizant of the way that dice work. Again, target spaces that are about 7 or so away from somebody if you're going to build at the last minute, and you should build at the last minute because having capital on hand is good. Be wary of over investing in the board, because any money spent on the board has a best case scenario 50% return if you need to go back and then sell it. For example, mortgaging a property or selling houses or hotels because you need to pay some rent. So having cash on hand is good. And at the end of the day, it is a random chance game, but you can play with the fact that it's a weighted random, and you can use strategies to evaluate how important it is that you get a certain thing. A huge part of Monopoly is not naturally acquiring a set. In fact, that very rarely happens. In very few games will you like roll on, let's say, orange. You won't get orange 1, 2, and 3 by just naturally rolling on them when they're unowned. Most of the time, they're going to be split up between the other players. And this is the other skill of Monopoly that I can't really teach as well. This is something you kind of got to extrapolate, and it really depends on the table and who you're playing with. But there's an art to trading. The thing is, when you're making a deal, you have to evaluate how important something is to somebody. And if they're playing by the same principles that you are, where they're valuing set completions, oftentimes trading for a missing piece involves giving somebody something that completes their set. And that's sort of the part of the risk reward aspect of Monopoly. You're putting in a risk of saying, okay, I'll complete my set, they'll complete my set, but I'm in a situation where I can capitalize on this better. If somebody's like, let's say they have greens 1 and 2 and you have green 3, and they have let's say light blue 1 and you have light blue 2 and 3. It's a pretty logical trade to say, okay, I'll complete light blue, you'll complete green. And you look at their cash on hand. If they don't have enough money, if they're not like rolling in dough to complete green 3, that's an amazing trade for you. You should give up this $320 property for this $100 one, like without even thinking about it, because you can turn this set into something that's actually getting you money and winning you the game. They can't do anything with that set. They need to have an astronomical amount of money to build that set up. So you can evaluate the game state based off of how much money they have on hand, what could they build, and then look at your resources and say, okay, with my limited resources, what can I do with this? What should I target? If I'm in a situation where I'm scrapping for money, I don't have like anything, and then I have like a bunch of north side properties, I will try to negotiate a deal where I'll give these away. I'll even give a full set of these away so I can get something on the south side, because I could realistically build those and then get back in the game. If I have no money but a bunch of north side properties, that I'm basically circling the drain at that point. I'm not going to win. I'm not going to win off of chip rent. And I'm certainly not going to knock a player out that way. So recognize a situation where if you don't have upward mobility, try to trade in a way that gets you it. Even if the trade is disastrously inequitable for you. Again, if I had a bunch of like really expensive properties that I couldn't build, I'd trade them all away for just like the brown set, because I can do something with that. And that's the thing that sort of separates a good player from a bad or new player, is the ability to accept when to take risks for certain things and recognizing a losing game state and trying to make lemonade. You're not going to win every game of Monopoly because there is that luck factor, but you can intelligently play against the luck. And so concludes my presentation on why Monopoly is an interesting game. I hope this was valuable. I'm sorry for anyone in Twitch chat who was saying anything. I was completely ignoring you. I'm literally just recording this for like a YouTube video. But I hope this was useful. And one final thing I want to show is I have this spreadsheet that sort of visualizes these things. This is a really good way to show the 3-house burst. So these columns right here, I can, let me zoom these in. This column represents the percent return on investment at different phases: 1 house, 2 house, 3 houses, 4 houses. And you'll notice how there's a bunch of really low numbers at a single house. And then once you hit 3 houses, suddenly it goes like, oh, suddenly these numbers are green. Suddenly these like are meaningful numbers. And it's just because the return on investment, for example, on Magenta even, it's like 60 with 1 house, 180 with 2 houses, 500 with 3. That's like it more than doubles when it goes from 2 to 3. So seriously, try to get 3 houses on whatever it is you build. Even the cheapo early properties will still get you a pretty large spike in return on investment at 3 houses. Even if the money itself isn't a whole lot, it'll still start getting you somewhere. You don't want to be the person who invests, let's say 300 on the light blues, building them up to 2 to get maybe 90 or 100 in return. If you just push it a little bit further and invest 450 to get to these, you'll actually start to see a pretty big return on investment if people land on there. It's literally a 3 times jump. All right, that's about it. I'm going to end this presentation now.